Making Moves, where we celebrate the moves that women are making. My name is Amy Pons. I'm a Master Certified Life Coach and an energy healer. I'm joined today with Heather Wallander. Heather is a woman with 20 years of experience across multiple fields, including sales, marketing, data analysis, software engineering, and what she later found to be her true calling, sales engineering. She dreamed of climbing the corporate ladder and rising to the C-suite, but a period of discrimination and retaliation like she had never experienced or imagined completely changed her career trajectory and opinion of what truly matters. 5 years ago, she never could have imagined herself an outspoken activist or an entrepreneur, but today she can't imagine any other path. Heather, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Amy. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, those last lines really resonated with me because 5 years ago, I was still on my corporate climb, and on paper, I had great titles. I had the money. I had some stock options. I was getting some awards, and inside, I was in turmoil. I never would have imagined. In fact, one of my friends said, "Why don't you open your own business?" I'm like, there is absolutely no way on this beautiful green earth that I would do that.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I think there's really two things. One of them is that I've never been a big social media poster, like in terms of sharing very publicly about what's going on. And so starting your own business requires that. It requires really putting yourself out there and those types of things. Also, on the other end of that, even just posting about this stuff and realizing that some people are going to find me outright annoying and doing it anyways. The situation changed me so much. And I was talking to a previous coworker last week. Yeah, I couldn't have imagined, because we were talking about how hard I used to work and how driven I was and how I was always going above and beyond. And I was just like, yeah, a year and a half, it just changed me dramatically and my perspective changed.
As an energy coach now, I always say that once we have that pivot, and when I say we, I mean the folks who have realized their threshold of what they will tolerate in whether it be work or anything outside of themselves, their threshold has changed. And so when we get to that point, that hustle or grind that we may have put outward of ourselves toward whether work again or whatever it is, that actually comes inward. And that hustle and grind comes toward remembering who we are under all of those layers of things that we were only trained or, we learned how to do.
Yeah. There was a lot of, in the beginning, was me wondering, who am I to do this? Who am I to have this fight? Who am I to have this voice? Who am I to speak out? And in recent months, it's really changed to why not me? And I also try to tell others, like when I speak to them, and there's a lot of women that reach out and they want to fight back or they want to make a difference and they just either don't know how or are scared to. And I always just or they feel daunted by how much needs to change. And I always just say, why not me? Why not you? Why not us? Because if we don't do it, who's going to?
We are on it.
Yes.
And like I was sharing with you my experience over the past week, I specifically feel that women are on the front lines of creating the balance that we've never seen in this lifetime, specifically outward in the workplace and society. And because of that emotional labor that we have always had is like climbing. So it's also important. There are some days where I don't feel like fighting today, or I don't feel like activating today. And that's also amazing and perfect. And I see your head shaking, so you get it. I encourage everyone that's always activist or advocating, really take time to listen inward into your body and your energy to say, if you don't feel like fighting today, don't.
Yeah.
Just take a nap and it's okay. So it's so funny you mentioned about how we have to ramp up social. So in corporate, I was never a big poster either. I was very politically correct, very good girl, mind your manners kind of vibe on anything on social, because also it was I know folks in my corporate world that would get called in saying, "Oh, you posted this over the weekend. Why are you on my personal social media?
Yeah.
Why are you checking me out?" So what was so beautifully freeing is that when I made my decision to pivot away, I opened the floodgates, and it's been both so cathartic, and I beautifully assist people self-select in or out of my orbit.
Mm-hmm.
So posting unabashedly me, that's beautiful. I'm not for everyone. And how exquisite is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I really try to be true to myself and say what I say. And I've had a lot of recent messages actually about building my brand. I think people see me posting and assume that I am very focused on making my personality profitable, but I'm not posting because of that. The way I see it is that I don't care if 3 people like my post or 300, because I'm posting whatever I'm posting probably to help with just one person out there, because that's enough for me. I don't care if one person likes the post and that one person really needed that message that day, then that's enough. It's also what makes some of this stuff so authentic, though, and why it resonates with so many people. But it takes a lot to get to a point where you are putting yourself out there and you're okay with knowing others might be talking about you behind your back and making fun of you and in criticizing you, and you're opening that door and being okay with that.
Awesome. I applaud anyone. Great. And especially after you have received psychological abuse in the workplace, those can sting and get in, whether we realize it or not. So that's a lot of work that I do with clients now, is that making sure that the internal energy is ironclad. So when something like that comes to you, your attention, you get to say, oh, not me, not mine. Great. That's theirs.
I definitely resonate with that, though, because one of the things I'll say is that I made the mistake of searching my own name after the LinkedIn post thing happened. And unbeknownst to me, prior, somebody had posted about me on Reddit and somebody had posted about me on more of a public blind post. And I couldn't help it. I read it. And I will say, well, there's nowhere near anything what celebrities get. The first thing I thought was like, oh no, this is why I understand, is because it's hard to read these very personal attacks. And these are anonymous, so people can be as cruel as they want to be or whatnot. And it would definitely be a lie to say that it didn't hurt my feelings and I didn't take it personally and it didn't take me a day or two to recover. And I think more people need to talk about that, because it's okay, like you said, to sometimes have low days or to let that stuff impact you, and then there's ways of dealing with it. I think if we acknowledge more of it, then, maybe people will feel less afraid to do it because they know they're not alone.
Please, I invite you to text me the next time you do that. I'm always an open ear for the way that has. We're human. It's not like it's just kind of like I'm rubber, you're glue. It's such a vulnerability, and I'm just so proud of you. And when I make posts, people are actually pretty brazen and post as them feedback about me, which I'm like, cool. Black, beautiful. Thank you. So a lot of times within workplace psychological safety, from my perspective, I'm not just one thing or do one thing. My whole orbit is evolving and, coaching, podcasting, advocating, that people are pretty quick to kind of pigeonhole me into one thing. So the folks who could say it's not only about HR, it's corporate culture, I actually feel like this is a larger humanitarian thing we're in, because there's been like a clash of the titans within the 4 big generations of the workplace, and the need for those quote unquote in power to not only restore that power after the pandemic, but also maintain that control. So it's a lot bigger than that. So it takes a lot of us, as you can imagine, to kind of be on that forefront on both ends for the individuals and the entities, the organizations. This is not just corporate, it's every industry.
Yeah, I do think that there is something to be said, though, for the amount of power that's been given to corporations in recent years. And I talk a lot about arbitration agreements because I just did not even know, and I can't tell you the number of people I've shared that with or shared what arbitration agreements are. And they question, they're like, I didn't even know that was legal. And I'm like, yes, exactly. And people will be like, well, why is this allowed? And I always tell them, it's like, even a non-disclosure agreement, you can understand what that is. Nobody understands what an arbitration agreement is. And everyone is signing away the rights, and everyone thinks that the only ones that care about it are the ones that are trying to fight back. But I think it's contributed to a larger issue, though, to your point of losing that humanity, because we basically removed consequences for corporations. And so they've lost any level of humanity that they once had in terms of taking care of employees. And as a result, we are seeing, even if you never want to sue your company, even if you never want to take that action, we're seeing these toxic environments, these workplace bullying. We're seeing companies not pay people correctly. And if you are, especially more people are subject to arbitration agreements, if they're making less than $13 an hour, it's more common for them. And if your claim is only $1,000, no attorney is taking that case. And so if you are blocked from doing it collectively, you're silenced. And I think that and other laws like non-disclosure agreements, things like that I know and workplace abuse is fighting for it or to try to help correct. I think that's just, we've given too much power to
When I interviewed the founder of Workplace Psychological Safety Act, one of the co-founders, Deb Falzoy, who I think you've met her. She was on Women Making Moves in the past, and our episode is called Employers Have Too Much Power. and that's to your point, like Workplace Psychological Safety Act is the legislation geared toward holding those employers accountable. And A lot of people, when they receive abuse in the workplace, they want to get out first of the workplace, out of the situation, and also like be okay. And that means like right away, that means like financially. And so a lot of times, that's just not an option because it takes a pretty big fight right now. Because again, we all know, those of us that have been in the experience in the situation, organizations and corporations will go into like a lockdown defense mode, and it's you or them. So we want to open up the options from a Workplace Psychological Safety Act perspective so that an arm outside of HR is built to maintain workplace psychological safety, saying, here's what it is, build it into the code of conduct, have a compliance point around it, regulations, all of those types of things to say, this is what you can and can't do legally to treat someone. And the enforcement, I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to be really easy when someone's having a bad day. Is that workplace psychological abuse? Maybe. And an apology if it's a one-off, right? But that's the kind of, that's just an apology would be amazing. If like you're just having an off day, everyone has one, be human. But to make sure that not only the reporter, the abused, is not only taken care of, and that's either getting out with a substantial, I don't know if it's a payout or, but not silencing them, but also making sure they're okay physically, mentally, emotionally. But also, I will save this for the abuser. They are maintaining that control and the only thing that they feel safe in. So it's like, what if something were to look like, hey, in order to keep your job, you may undergo, I don't know whether it's therapy or like specific coaching or whatever that is. So it's accountability.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I honestly wonder, I think there's this idea of like, by the time I was vocal at all about what was happening to me, it was after a very long experience of trying to fight it the way that I was told to fight it, meaning being silent, going through the HR investigation, going through lawyers, going through the process of like not really being public about it. And all of this time, I've always wondered, what if somebody had taken me seriously when I first raised concerns and had just simply said to my director, what you're doing, not cool. That has to stop.
Exactly.
And really made it clear. I mean, I don't mean like slap on the wrist and said, don't do that again. I mean, like something that was like literally like something has to change. We're going to be monitoring for it, whatever. Maybe he is who he is and that behavior would have continued. Maybe he is who he is and he would have modified his behavior because he would have known it wasn't tolerated at that workplace. Maybe nothing changes. I don't know. But I've always wondered, and I look back at the relationships that has disrupted for me and the trauma that I have from it. And I just always wonder, like, what if somebody would have just believed me? Because I think of discrimination now in two phases. It's the one that somebody initially discriminates against you. And then it is a much wider net of discrimination by your leadership, your HR, everyone you're talking to, that assumes that, at least for me, in my case as a woman, I was taking things too personally. I was, basically reacting emotionally without maybe saying those exact words. And I think it's crazy. Companies don't even realize that that is also discrimination. Like to default to assuming the woman is overreacting.
Right.
Is literally the definition of having an implicit bias and then applying that so that it becomes discrimination. Right. And no one is doing anything about it. And I do think that's why you need a truly objective third party, because if they are paid for by the company directly versus like the board or whatnot, they're never going to be truly objective. And no. I found that out, firsthand.
Same. And that's where I got to my point. I said, okay, today's my last day. I love what you said about what if someone were to say, do you know that harmed that person?
Yeah.
And if let's give benefit of the doubt for a minute. What if they're like blissfully ignorant, being like, whoa, I had no idea. Okay, that's like a go forward conversation that we could all have maybe together. If you were being like, yeah, and it's the workplace and they should just buck up because there's, whoa, 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 whoa. That's where we have like a much bigger conversation with the abuser. Because again, I would never want a reporter to be in the space where that person was like doubling down on how they treated that person.
For me personally, my personal perspective on it was feeling that the company and HR and everyone around me that had ignored me doubled down on it by the time it became clear that there was a problem.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not it would have continued had it been addressed early on. Once it was clear that there was a problem, everyone around me, it was almost, I still wonder, and I don't know why I spend so much time thinking about this, but I still wonder, what if we made a safer environment for people to be able to admit that they made a mistake and they allowed their own implicit bias to play a role in them maybe not listening? But then maybe we can avoid companies and everyone around you doubling down on it, because I don't think they want to accept that they caused harm to a
Right.
person. They don't want to accept that they allowed this to
No.
happen. And so they just do exponentially more damage. And it's so messed up.
We're on it. We're on it. You and me. Okay, all of us, we're awake, we're
Right.
aware, and we're moving forward. What moves are you excited to be making right now?
So I'm really excited about just being outspoken, the women that I've been able to talk to and meet to communicate my story or to help out. I can't tell you the number of women that I'm obviously not a lawyer and they know that, but like who reach out to me just like for a perspective of somebody who's gone through it and making decisions. Like they'll be working with their lawyer and obviously have that perspective. But I know that for them, it's even validating to hear, hey, I know it's really hard to accept that it's severance and you really want that title change with it, but whether or not you're willing to keep fighting. I know you're really wanting this just to be over, and also you're really wanting to fight this on principle, but consider, I actually just had a conversation over the weekend, like consider, like, is this worth fighting for you? Because if you threaten to walk away from the settlement, there's a good chance that if you try to come back, they try to offer you less or whatnot. And so like you have to really choose what you're doing. And so I have a lot of women that I'm trying to help that way, at least to sympathize and say, I get how hurtful this is, that it sucks. Like you're like, this is so insignificant for you. Why can't you just do it for me to make up for what I went through? And I think sometimes people just want to hear that there's somebody else. And so I'm excited about that. I am excited about what I'm building. I don't know why I remain naively optimistic about change, but maybe it's a good thing. It's what keeps me moving forward. But I have started my own company. It's called Brio Edge, that is essentially a new tool that's focused on leadership empowerment, because I just think that we have no accountability for leaders. We have no idea whether or not leaders are good. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen, CEOs or whatnot, or different executives come out on a stage and be like, we have the best leadership team. And it's like, do you really know that? You don't know that. You have no idea, because you have no way to really track their performance. And a lot of employees will say, well, I give feedback to my leaders. And it's like, does anyone look at that though? Does anyone compare that to other leaders? So I'm really, really excited about that. I genuinely believe that it will make a difference. I do worry, if I'm being honest, that I have been so outspoken against companies and corporate power that we'll see how successful I can be as I move forward. But I'm excited about that. After speaking with you all on arbitration agreements, there's also a bill in the House and the Senate right now that they are pushing for, that I'm really trying to raise awareness about that specifically. Because if I can keep one person from signing a severance agreement or an employment agreement if they have a choice, or at least being aware, I just wish I knew I had one, then I've done some good. And so I don't know what the future holds. I feel like I'm on the right path. That's how I've described it lately, is that I am still very much fumbling through this new path that I'm on. But wherever it leads, I just know it's the right one.
It is. You trusting that and knowing that within yourself is the energy that is being asked of you. Coming from an energetic perspective, getting a little woo-woo here for a second, the outdated systems that the workplaces are rooted in, white supremacy, patriarchy, late stage capitalism, colonialism, that is crumbling. So when I hear you and I really see you when you say, oh, I've really been out there and I've really lightened a torch up against these toxic cultures. And I think you will see, especially over the next 6 months, women like you and me being called on to say, okay, how do we do this? Holy shit, we're in a pickle. Yeah, you are. So just know that the energy is shifting toward us all being aware, us meaning just general society, saying that, oh, we can do better. And, oh, by the way, we have Gen Z hot on our heels being like, this is unacceptable. So
I really want to highlight, it was somebody in Gen Z that fought back against an unfair decision that gave me the courage to find out what was going on when I was not promoted, that gave me the courage to ask the question. And I think it can't be underestimated. The Gen Z is not just demanding change for themselves. They are inspiring others to question what doesn't make sense and to just call it out. And, I'm so grateful for that call that I was on when this person like just challenged and was very logical and just basically said, that's not okay. And I was just like, wow,
wow.
yeah, we should all be doing that.
And that's what I mean by it's crumbling, because outside of the energetics of it, we have the 4 big generations in the workplace right now. And the fact is, Gen Z vehemently disagrees with how boomers are running the workplace. And when I say that, I am not suggesting we don't still need boomers. I'm saying that all the generations, all 4 of us, to create the change going forward is being able to say, okay, I realize the way I learned it or I'm doing it may not fit for not just generations, but all the people in the workplace. So how do we work together to really encourage everyone to thrive as their authentic selves? That, for me, that's really the conversation. And that's why I feel like it is crumbling because Gen Z is so unapologetic about it. So we're getting there. I want to go to a post that you made recently, and I'm curious to hear about the background of you posting this. So the post is, are you paying attention, or will we continue pretending everything is fine until there are no women left? And this links to an article in Apple News, Corporate Women's Gains Fall Victim to Anti-Woke Backlash. What's up?
So there's kind of two things. One, the reason why I posted the statement that I did is because I've read so many statistics and stories about women leaving the workplace that when I went through discrimination myself, I was like, oh, this is why. This is why all of these articles are saying that women are exiting. Now I understand, because previously I would read them and think, why would I walk away from my career after putting all this effort into it? And now I get it. And so I read that article, and it's just so infuriating because I feel like at so many companies right now, it has gotten so bad that it is visible. Like, it's not even you need to run the data to see it. Like, you can just look at your leadership and be like, oh yeah, there's no women there, or there's no people of color there. Or even, I also mentioned this, nobody's talking about even the discrimination that occurs on socioeconomic class. Like, did you go to the right school? Do you come from the right family? Do you have that privilege, the nepotism that exists? And so the post that I added yesterday actually built on this, because I posted about a white man who worked really, really hard and was passed over, and there was no doubt about it. He, was told to work for this promotion, and then they basically would not move forward because everyone else was white men. And my problem with that is that there is this DEI backlash that's happening because companies are going to extremes constantly. Like, it's like either we're doing DEI a little bit, or we're either not doing DEI at all, which is now what we're seeing, and that's going to be worse for women, or we're doing DEI, and I put that in quotations because they were doing Band-Aid solutions like that, and that just made everyone else angry. All you did was have somebody leave their job. You end up not having anyone in that role, and then essentially you lose one of your top employers, and you contribute to what we're seeing now in the backlash, because of course they're going to be angry if they're working very, very hard. And I don't agree with anyone getting promoted without being at least equivalent. But the problem is now we're doing nothing because companies have messed it up. We're moving into this era where we're going to have no one doing anything. And so we never solved the issue.
DEI was created by the same systems that we were talking about earlier. They're still deeply rooted, that were created 100 years ago, 100 plus years ago. An example you brought with it's all white men, so they're like, oh, we can't have another white man. I would say it's a much larger, like, why do you have all these other white men? And what kept you from having a slate of diverse candidates in the past? So now it's like forcing it with not hiring another white man.
I did say that. I said, I
Yeah.
definitely do think they should have asked the question of like, why do we only keep filling this role with white men? Where is it we're not giving opportunities to people, diverse candidates? Are we not hiring them? Are we holding them back for long-term implicit bias, which is often very common? And I think that that's the problem, is that we didn't solve any of it. We just ended up making one group really angry about the whole initiative, when the only reason people were asking for it was they wanted fairness. They just wanted to not be discriminated against.
Yeah, and true equity, which is different from equality, of course. And just saying, hey, every slate of candidates should be all walks of life, because the people that are only safe in the four systems created this initiative to say, okay, force these hirings. It was
the cheapest solution, though. If you think about it, it costs money. It costs a lot of time to go in and figure out what is broken in the system that's preventing women or diverse candidates in general from being able to rise to this level. That's a lot harder.
Yeah, the dismantling of these systems is going to be really expensive and timely. The Great Resignation over pandemic was the movement of women leaving the workplace, and we're continuing to hemorrhage women. And don't be mistaken, there are people that really want that.
Yeah, well, that's the other side of it, though, is one of the things I really didn't understand when I was going through my experience was the performative actions that companies will take to try to make their environment look more welcoming. Why? Why are you even bothering? Obviously, I know it's for, good media and all that stuff, but it's very disheartening to be in a situation like I was and watching these performative actions and just wondering why. Why are you doing this? You clearly don't want us here, to your point, like, or at least it's that's how it feels, that's what your actions indicate, then stop pretending. You have three women at your company and you keep promoting them. And does no one else notice that it's only ever one, like they don't have anyone else? And that's the reason why I posted that article though, is because I think that that's the other side that bothers me is like, it's gotten to a point where it's so easy to see it that I don't understand how more people aren't angered by it.
Yeah. It's like, oh, let's bring three women in this massive company. Then it's like, oh, we did it. And that's why we see like such incredible women leaving because they were never, ever set up to succeed in that environment.
If a company is doing it to check the box, you're also just not going to be valued. The diversity that gives you a different opinion, which is the benefit of having you there, isn't going to be valued because that's not really why they brought you in. They brought you in to check a box, not because they recognize the value to avoiding groupthink. That's the other reason I can't understand it when you have all of these people that are basically the same. The groupthink is crazy. How do you possibly survive in our environment with all these changes, all this technology, this rapid development, if you are just collectively surrounded by a bunch of people with the same exact opinions and thoughts that you have? Like, good luck, I guess, is kind of how I see it.
So, full circle, big breath. I still see it crumbling. I know you are an advocate for arbitration, severance, NDAs. What is your thought on the recent ban of non-competes?
I think it's good. I think there's too much power concentrated in corporations right now. And I think that's why we've gotten to such an extreme. Also, why I believe that it is crumbling and there will be changes because we've gotten to a point where there's just so much extreme that something has to give and it's going to have to be corporations. But the non-compete, I don't want to take away from it. I imagine there was some very compelling reasons and people that experienced something that had to do with non-competes that they felt held them back. I think one of the harder parts is not being like, I want my thing first. Why can we do this and not do the other stuff? I think it's disappointing to me that we seem to be able to pass something like this, but we don't seem to be able to pass anything related to a discrimination, I guess, which is supposed to be protected based on the Constitution.
We were excited about it over at WPSA because we see it as one of the big power plays that you could, again, exert over an individual that wanted to chart their own career path, and it boxes you out from staying in your industry for a certain amount of time. So to the individual, it was damaging and it was power over, of course, and is put in place, and I'm not an expert on these non-competes, but it was put in place to not give trade secrets. Spoiler alert, that's happening every day within current employers. Big monopoly companies that are quote unquote competitors, y'all, they're talking. Okay. So non-competes are just kind of silly, but this was a windfall we felt because it was less power over an individual.
I will take any win.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I 100% agree. And I definitely can see, I hadn't thought about the perspective on not being able to work within your industry by being able to be taken. I imagine, especially for people that are higher up, like executives and whatnot, as you rise to higher levels, it becomes even more challenging to move around. So to your point, you made a comment that they were initially intended to not share trade secrets. And I actually think there is a universal theme through all of this stuff. Like arbitration agreements were initially created for business to business contracts. They were not meant to be used for employers. And that's actually where I think the real problem is again, going back to just too much concentrated power in a single place. And I know you and I had originally talked about when I was coming on, like having the privilege of being able to even fight back. And that's really one of the biggest things I think is sad is I can't tell you the number of people that they need health insurance or they just need the financial ability to continue working. They can't speak out for whatever reason. And they are, subjected to reasons for one reason or another that they can't get any recovery from what they went through. And it's just too much power. I mean, that's really what it comes down to is that as an individual, I had to be confident that I would be okay if I lost my job before I filed an HR complaint. That's a problem. It's a problem that I had to have a conversation with my husband about what the potential consequences were, but that is the reality.
And that's what we're wanting to build in to give someone who's experiencing workplace abuse more options. Because again, you and I, we were privileged to be able to leave. Many can't. And so then it becomes a much more dangerous conversation because it's the whole livelihood. It's their entire livelihood that is on the line. What would you say to people who are listening to this conversation and are either experiencing abuse and they're in that camp that they couldn't possibly leave because there aren't options. As you and I know, there just aren't that many options, especially when you've come to a place where you're physically, mentally, emotionally, you feel defeated. What would you
Yeah.
share with them? And then also, what would you share in the space that you created your company to the leaders? I'm going to put that loosely. This is just me. But the leaders who are like, and very few in my experience are willing to admit that psychological abuse is rampant in their organization. And what would you say to help them either become aware or a well-intentioned leader that are like, I know I have some pockets that aren't really healthy. What do I do? So what would you say to someone who is feeling really trapped and locked in to the abuse? And then also to the people, leaders who do have the power to potentially change it and are either not willing or back to our point of time and money, no, it will take a lot of that.
Yeah. What I would say to people going through it is that I know that it breaks you and that the gaslighting makes you feel that you might be crazy and you are not crazy. Like your instincts, if your instincts are screaming at you that this is wrong, it's wrong. And I hope that you have a great support system around you. And if you don't have a great support system around you, reach out to me, reach out to others that are vocal on the issue. Like I understand not everyone can speak out, but there is a population out there that is willing to be at least a voice of reason or a voice of a similar experience just to kind of at least resonate, talk through your solutions with. Everyone's going to be a bit different. And just know that it will get better when you leave. People have talked to me about staying in bad environments now or potentially even going into an environment they know is bad. And I tell people, I recognize that it's not a great environment for employees right now. Do what you have to do to earn a paycheck and also be aware of the environment you're in because your boss may be amazing, but you need to know that you're in a safe company because you don't want a situation like what I went through, which is your boss changes and then you suddenly realize the company you're operating in. And so be aware, work with other people, find if there's anything you can do in the background that maybe is vocal. And I really try to not tell people like you need to speak out, but there's also this level of at some point, I know it's scary, but we have to do something. We need to work together. I know you're angry and I know you're scared and I know it can feel like you're the only one, but you can watch documentaries about change. Like change has happened and there have been plenty of oppressed people who have worked together to make change. And I think we can, but we do need to work together. And so I don't want to fault anyone for not speaking up.
And I would say too, the bystanders, anyone who's aware that abuse is happening to an individual and also doesn't speak up, there are so many layers and complexities to when you are aware of an abusive situation going on. So to Heather's point, reach out to her, reach out to me. We have so many resources through In-Workplace Abuse, Workplace Psychological Safety Act that can connect you with either legal or outside HR support. I'm going to say one thing, and I'm not broad brushing every HR organization in this entire world. And I will say that for the bulk, when you go to HR and report, it becomes the company versus you.
Yeah. I was told plenty of times that HR is not your friend. And a lot of times HR are women. And I'll say there's something very interesting about expressing your experience to a woman and then being, I don't even know how to describe the response, but basically just not being given any empathy and how that hurts. And I guess it goes back to just knowing that you're not alone. And you're not the only. That's actually one of the things I've said a lot. And one of the reasons I shared before I had any idea my post was going to go viral is I just wanted people at my company to know you're not alone. You're not the only. Don't let them make you feel crazy because the gaslighting, the discrimination is awful, but the gaslighting destroys you.
We're working on a campaign so that people can see in the workplace what some of these real life examples look like. Gaslighting, isolation, dismissing, institutional bias, or reenacting those. So people can be aware, be like, oh, that's abuse? Yeah, it is.
I spend a lot of time trying to Google because when you're in it, you don't realize you're fighting discrimination until like 6 months in. And so you spend a lot of time trying to figure out like, this seems like maybe discrimination, but what exactly is happening? And I think it's so important to have real life scenarios because people just don't get it's almost never somebody shouting in front of 50 people something blatantly discriminatory. It's almost always a million small little things that add up.
My boss used to say on one-on-ones, he would quote unquote prep me for a meeting with his boss. And I would bring items to that meeting and I would share them with his boss that he would then say, I don't know where these came from. Why did you prepare these? So imagine that being in a room with very high-ranking leaders, that was horrifying.
Yeah. Why it's crazy to me that like there's just no visibility, no accountability for leaders because we base so much of leadership promotion and advancement based on how well they are at managing up. And then we wonder why employees are so unhappy. It's because you're rewarding managing up versus actually managing the team and elevating the team.
Right, right. Speaking of which, leaders, what would you say?
So, in terms of acknowledging a toxic environment, I would say I know that that was not the dream. I know that when companies start out, there's a reason why it's very common for CEOs. I would even say this to my own company. Like I know that this wasn't the dream. Like when CEOs start out, oftentimes they'll interview people until they just absolutely can't. And then it goes to the executives, and those executives will interview people until they just can't. And then, the company grows. So I know that a lot of times this was not the dream. This was not the intention. And I also know that there were honestly not a lot of tools that provide the visibility to actually hold your leaders accountable. So it's okay. And again, this goes back to us creating an environment or finding a path to bridge that gap between the people who want change and not being so angry. It's hard not to be angry.
Well, they need a safe place too.
Exactly. Recognizing the humanity in them also. And the fact that, like, I get that it's uncomfortable to say, hey, this is going on. I actually recognize that one of the reasons why I was ignored initially, it's easier to accept that I may be being emotional than it is to accept that you've allowed somebody like this into your organization or you're allowing this to continue. And I would just say, you have the power to make the change, to be the difference. And I do think the dividends your employees will give you, because every company says that we care about our employees. And when they're smaller, they do. They actually really invest. That's why I was talking about like the CEOs interviewing everybody. But we have to find a way. And that's what I'm trying to build is we have to find a way to scale that change because otherwise, I mean, every company's got toxic. So many companies since I posted and I had women reach out to me and share their stories or even men as well. I don't know what the safe environment is anymore. I don't even know if there is one because it just seems like even if you join the best company, are you sure that they couldn't hire a really toxic leader that you end up rolling up into? And then that changes everything, even if not for the whole company, for your org. So I think the incoming generation, they want transparency, they want honesty, they want visibility, and they will forgive you.
Mhm.
But they are not going to forgive you if you keep trying to pretend everything is fine. In fact, if anything, you are driving them out. And maybe they're not quitting right now because of the economy, but they're quiet quitting. They're not giving you 100%. And so acknowledging the problems is the only way to solve them. And solving them is really the only way to success. You're not going to be successful without the next generation. And the next generation's not showing up for you unless you change.
Heather, where can we find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, of course, so you can just search me by name there. I actually recently started TikTok where I'm sharing more and more there. And that one, my handle is just Rebuilding Heather because that's where I feel like I am at right now. And then if you want to look up the company, and you can obviously contact me through there, it is brioedge.com. So BRIOEDGE.com. And then I also have another movement that I am, at least raising awareness for, and we'll see, I would say that we're not quite as evolved as where you are with the organization you're with, but it's called Arbitration Revolt. And, you can find a lot of information about arbitration, where to look for it, how to know if you have one. Knowing the situation is half the battle. So take a look at any of those. You can reach out to me through any of those means, and I hope to hear from people.
Thank you for the work you're doing. And I sense we're going to be very close in this. Closing remarks as we wrap up.
I would just say that I think we talked a lot about some of the challenges that we see in the current workforce, but I really want to kind of end on a note of optimism in the sense that I agree with you. I think change is coming. I think as more of us speak out, there is going to be a shift. We outnumber them so drastically, and the reality is they can't be successful without us, and they know it. So just remember that, like, as one, I know we can feel small, but this is how change happens, and it's happened before, and it can happen again, and it's coming.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you so much, Amy.